Hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly Wednesday webinar with Squibbler. My name is Moxie. Now, I'm going to be talking to you today about one of my favorite genres, which is horror and writing terror. So let's get started. In this webinar, you're going to learn how to build dread through atmosphere. We'll talk about pacing and tension for mastering the rhythm of fear and take a look at some examples. And we'll take a look at the unseen, using the power of suggestion to your advantage when you're writing terror. So welcome. Just a quote to think about from the beginning from H.P. Lovecraft. He says the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. So I just thought that was a great quote to start with. There is a difference between terror and horror. Both in books and on film, terror and horror are two different experiences for the reader or the viewer if you're writing screenplays. Terror builds through anticipation and dread. It's going to keep your audience or your reader on edge as they imagine what nightmare might unfold, whether they're turning the pages late at night or watching shadows lengthen across a cinema screen. Terror is the dread of what might happen. It's a slow build, a mounting tension, the creeping realization that something is very wrong. It relies on atmosphere and suggestion. It engages the imagination. It's psychological and emotional. And it's the shadow moving in peripheral vision. It makes us flinch. It makes us squirm. Horror, on the other hand, is confronting the reader or viewer with the actual terrible moment where the monster is revealed, the gore is displayed, or the unspeakable is made explicit. And it forces your readers or your viewers to witness rather than merely fear what lurks in the darkness. The confrontation, the horror, is the shock of what's happening, the visceral reaction to the threat being revealed. So horror is direct and explicit. It's physical, it's immediate, it's the payoff to terror's buildup. It is the natural climax of the terror. It's the monster stepping into the light to reveal itself. So what you want to do in your writing is to develop both. You're not aiming for one or the other in the best horror. So you're going to use terror to build tension and horror to deliver the impact. So it's a good idea to study writers and screenwriters who have mastered this balance. So a really good example here is the movie Jaws, Steven Spielberg's movie. It's adapted from the novel by Peter Benchley. It does a really good job of balancing horror and terror. And a lot of that has to do with composer John Williams' distinctive soundtrack for the shark's approach. That dun dun. It is one element that helps to build terror for the viewer. Another example is the underwater shark point of view shots. It's a very creative idea where Spielberg uses these to help increase the tension the viewer feels, especially as the shark is prowling the waters, where we can see beachgoers' legs dangling in the water as the shark is considering what option to get from the buffet of victims in the water. So that is building terror in this example. The horror here is when Chief Brody finally sees the massive size of the shark, and his reaction is one of sheer horror. And I have the still here from the movie. The monster is now exposed, and the hunting trip situation in Quint's rickety boat is much more dire. So this tension has built up to this moment. We get to see the full length of the shark and how awful their situation really is. So those are the difference between tension and horror. One way to build your terror is by building your atmosphere. Spend a lot of time developing it. You can use sensory immersion here because terror does live in the details. You might even try engaging more than one sense. So you could use sound, what the character hears or doesn't hear. This is especially good for characters that are in the dark in your book or your screenplay. Sight, of course, darkness is really terrifying to humans. I think it's a natural biological instinct, especially from our primary days when we were around fires and we couldn't see beyond the light of the fire. So things like darkness, shadows, mistakes that we see from distorted perspectives are all things that you can use to your advantage as well. Another sense you don't see used very often is smell, this idea of decay. Something that's musty or something that smells wrong, maybe coppery for blood or toxic. These are all things that you can develop as well. Touch is very important, especially with character reactions, temperature changes, textures, physical sensations, that fear of your heart beating through your chest. These are all things you can use to develop in your writing as well. And then taste as well. Metallic fear or copper blood or acrid smoke are all things that you can develop for your readers to get immersed in the terror that you're trying to build. So one way to build the terror with Squibbler's AI is by using the sensory details. I'll show you how to do this just briefly in case you need a short tutorial. What you'll do is if you've written a passage, here I've already written one, and it's discussing the old house on a dimly lit street corner. Weeds are in the way to the pathway to the stew. So Jim struggled through the tall grasses, which grabbed against his thighs, an effort to prevent him moving forward. He hesitated and looked back at his friends. I told you he'd chicken out, Lance scoffed. I'm not chickening out, Jim said. He tried to disguise the mounting fear crawling over his back. He looked back at the house and took another hesitant step forward. So this passage that I've written is including a lot of touch and a lot of the sense of vision and some dialogue here. So what you can do is highlight a passage that you'd like to experiment with and then go to describe under the Smart Writer. Once you've got describe set up, you've got the option of sight, smell, taste, sound, and touch, and the optional option of creating a metaphor. What you'll do is just select the ones that you want to use and deselect any that don't make sense. I'm going to just go ahead and leave them all since I'm experimenting. I'm going to go ahead and click describe. The AI is going to take this passage that I've written where I've used 2 senses primarily, and then it's going to revise it for me using all of the 5 senses. So it will have a more sight-based description in the first option. It will have a more smell-based. Here it's mentioning the musty smell of decay filling Jim's nostrils as he approached the abandoned house, and so forth. And as he gets closer, the smell is stronger. So that's really, really well done. I like this one. It will have a taste one as well, that the musty scent is filling his nose with a bitter, almost acrid, acidic taste. That's really descriptive as well. It'll have more sound-based in this next one. It says it has an oppressive silence, and then it will have more touch-based. His hand is trembling as he's reaching for the doorknob and so forth. And then somewhere here it will have a metaphor for me as well. So this is a really good way to experiment with different senses for building atmosphere. And these are all lovely. I would use any one of these to help develop this part of my book if I needed to. So another example here, you could use different senses together. So here it says the hallway stretched impossibly long, each fluorescent light humming a different pitch. The air tasted of old pennies and something sweeter, something rotted behind the walls. Her shoes squeaked against the linoleum that felt too soft, too yielding, like skin. So in this instance, you have taste, sound, touch. You have all the senses, and you even have this nice metaphor as well, which is this one is a simile, comparing her shoes to skin, which is a really kind of gross comparison. So another thing that you can do to build terror is to think about your setting and then subvert expectations that your readers might have for those settings. Some of the scariest moments in film and in books happen in places that are familiar. So a childhood home, for example, like in the movie Poltergeist, can be a place of extreme dread. A hospital, if you think of The Exorcist 3, I think that film has one of the scariest scenes that I've ever seen on film. And you don't expect it. You expect to be safe and taken care of in a hospital. So it's a nice way to subvert what the viewer expects. Or you might think at a shopping mall near closing time, like in Dawn of the Dead. That's a really nice setting where usually people are shopping and enjoying a day. They might go have lunch in the food court. And here it's a place that's being overrun by zombies. Terror and pacing are extremely important in creating terror as well. They go together. So constant terror can exhaust your readers. Strategic relief makes the next scare hit harder. So you could have something where you have a false security moment where the monster seems to leave, and we'll see how this works in the movie The Ring. You could have character moments, and this happens quite frequently where characters are bonding before something tragic happens. Happens a lot when there is a cast of quite a few people experiencing the terror together, like in slasher movies. You can also have misdirection, where characters are looking at one threat, there's another one that may be growing that they've ignored. So we'll take a look at an example from Misery, Stephen King's novel. And let's look at how Stephen King creates tension and terror in a pivotal scene from his novel Misery. And I'm going to go back to Squibbler here. I think maybe I should make it a little larger. So this is a scene where Annie is talking to the protagonist here, and we'll just take a look at it. I am going to read it, but I've highlighted some things that are really important in the way that Stephen King paces it and the way he uses dialogue. So when he quieted down, she asked, "How many times did you leave the room?" "The knife. Oh no, the knife." "Twice. No, 3 times. I had to get some water yesterday. But I wasn't trying to escape, Annie. I'm writing a book." "You didn't try the telephone, I suppose, or investigate the locks?" "No, you were such a good little boy." "Of course I did." He was beginning to wish she would go away. The drug was making him partly tell the truth, but he also badly wanted to go to sleep. "How many times did you go out?" "I told you, 3 times." "How many times?" Her voice was rising. "Tell the truth." "I am telling the truth. 3 times." "You're treating me like a fool." "Annie, I swear." "Oh, yes, you swear. People who tell lies love to swear." "Well, let me tell you, Mr. Clever, I stretched hairs all over the place. Upstairs, downstairs, out in the barn, and a lot of them have gone." "Annie, how could I have gone upstairs? How could I have gone outside to the barn?" But she didn't give him time to protest. She went straight on. "So you tell me that you left the room only 3 times, Mr. Clever, and I'll tell you you're the fool, not me. How many times?" "3. Once for medicine." "Yes." "Once for food." "Yes." "And once for water." "Yes, yes, I told you." She reached into her pocket again and brought out the butcher's knife. "I looked under your mattress just before I gave you the injection for your operation, and see what I found." What did she mean by operation? He was suddenly sure that she intended to use the knife on him. So the reason that the scene is just excellent is that you have the protagonist's interior thoughts as he's facing this questioning from Annie, who is clearly not there mentally, and she asks him, "How many times did you leave the room?" And he immediately thinks of the knife. And look at the pacing here that King uses. The knife, oh no, the knife. These are not full sentences; they're just fragments. With the dialogue, it's a back and forth, very short, where she's interrogating him. And she asks him how many times, and then we get her voice is rising. And this little short detail, a simple declarative sentence, is telling us that her emotions are changing and not in a good way. We also get here after she's interrogated him, he's trying to continue to lie to her and hide what he's stolen. She reaches into her pocket, and then we get the terror that she's got the butcher's knife. And here there's an allusion to, "I gave you an injection for your operation." And this is just mounting terror for the readers here. We're wondering, why does she have the knife? She's found him out. And also, what operation is she talking about? And he's under the realization, too, that she's going to use the knife on him. So that's a really good example of a way to develop terror using dialogue, using shorter sentences, using interior thoughts, psychologically, tight writing there from King. So if you're going to focus on writing a slow burn, you might want to think about starting subtle. Think about things that are small wrongnesses, a picture frame that may be slightly crooked, a door you remember closing is suddenly opened, something that's just outside of the normal. This is especially good for things like haunted houses. You want to escalate these things gradually. Each strange occurrence should slightly get worse than the last. Give readers time to use their own imagination between scares. Think about your sentence structure as well. Long, winding sentences are good for buildup, and then short, sharp sentences, like we saw in that scene from Stephen King, are really, really good for impact. You can intensify your writing as well as you edit with Scribbler's rewrite function. You can use the more intense, and we'll take a quick look at how to do that as well. So let's say that in this section here that I already used before for my book, where Jim is approaching this decrepit house, I'm going to highlight it, then go over to the rewrite function, and then you're going to use the pull down menu to use more intense as the option. This is really helpful for those of you writing horror and action scenes and thrillers and crime. Then you'll just click rewrite. The AI is going to take what you've highlighted and intensify that scene for you. And you'll see here that from where I put the old house, I love this. The AI has rewritten this as the skeletal remains of the old house clawed at the bruised twilight on the street corner. That's really lovely. It's personified what I've written. That was a very weak description and created this physical embodiment for this creepy old house. So again, two options. It's really, really built on up on this, and I can read through them and insert the one that I want to use. So another thing to think about, especially with your characterization as you're creating terror, is trying to make your fear personal. You want to show terror through the body. Involuntary responses of your characters like trembling, cold sweats, nausea, hyper awareness where you hear every sound, where pupils are dilated, the heart is beating, those reactions to having more adrenaline in your body. The fight, flight, or freeze, those primal survival instincts are really important. It's interesting that in most slasher films, you'll see people run. You don't often see people freeze, but that's what people do in real life. So you might experiment with twisting what people are expecting in your own horror. Loss of control of bodily functions is important too. Your bladder releasing itself, tears, your voice breaking. A good reference book for writing about emotions, not just for horror, but for things like grief, romance, and so forth, is The Emotion Thesaurus by Angela Ackerman and Becca Pugilist. It's a really good book. So with psychological terror, you can also tap into universal fears. One of those is the loss of control or agency. And when I was thinking about examples for this webinar, the film Open Water came to mind, where you have two people stranded from a boat in the ocean, and there are sharks that are starting to circle them. I can't think of a worse situation where you have lost all agency. You're just dangling in open water, as the title says, waiting to die. That's a really, really terrifying situation. Something like The Betrayal by the Familiar, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, is amazing. It's amazing that it was such an older film for this. It really subverts the audience expectations because we're initially following the heroine's story, and she is going to die halfway through the movie. And then you're wondering, what's the second half of this movie about? So that really betrays that plot that we are used to in movies, and it uses it to such a wonderful effect. Things like isolation and helplessness also tie into to our psychological terror. So a movie like Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, where the protagonist has gone way out to this crumbling mansion where this brother and sister live, and she's really by herself. The brother and sister have a very close, unusual relationship. And the sister does not like the new wife. So she's really isolated and helpless just with her relationships with the other humans there. And then you have the element of a ghost being there as well. Things like loss of identity or sanity also are a common universal fear for us. I think The Exorcist, both the book and the film, do this really well. There's really not much more terrifying than seeing a child that's hurt, and that's what is in William Blatty's book, and it's written very well with excellent effect in The Exorcist. Other things that worry us are things like the threat to loved ones, things like movies in The Others, which also subverts our expectations really well, and the movie The Ring. So here's an example from The Ring. I thought this was wonderful when it came out as well. When the police have showed up, when Rachel has discovered Samara's body at the bottom of the well, they've taken the body out of the well, the police have showed up, they think everything's solved. You as the viewer thinks that everything is solved. We're seeing a scene that is your typical end of a horror movie scene. The police have arrived, we've solved the crime, we solved the problem. So Rachel's son Aiden says, "Why is she not alone?" And Rachel says, "Because we helped her." And Aiden says, "Help her. Why'd we help her?" And Rachel says, "Aiden, What? It's all right. And Aiden's worried now, his eyes wide. She pulls him close. And Rachel says to him, I'm with you. I'm here. You're safe. She's all right now. She's sleeping. Like Katie in your drawing. See, she's sleeping. Then she holds him out in front of her, and he can see it. But Mom, a trickle of blood slips from Aiden's nose. Rachel is horror struck, and in the silence, Aiden says, Samara doesn't sleep. So here we know this terror is not over yet, which is a really nice, trick that the writers have played on the viewers here. Another suggestion for building your terror is hiding the monster. And you want to suggest things over revelation. The reader's imagination is a really powerful tool. So, what they're going to conjure up is always going to be more personal and terrifying than what you can describe. Some techniques for leaving things unseen is describe reactions, not the thing itself. How are people reacting to the terror that they're seeing? You might use partial glimpses. Shadows, sounds, movement are also really helpful. Let characters reference horror without explaining what they're seeing, and then focus on the aftermath rather than the event itself. So, an example here is from the film Rosemary's Baby. And this is just a wonderful scene here at the end of the movie where the protagonist has come up to the baby's crib. She has a knife in her hand. You wouldn't expect a mother to be carrying a knife towards the baby's crib. And her reaction, Mia Farrow's reaction, is so well done here that you almost think you've seen what's in the crib. We never see what's there. But the horror is her expression, what we're seeing here, and her reaction to what she's given birth to. The problem with showing your monster too early is that if you do that, you begin losing power. So keep something hidden, keep something unknowable. For example, going back to Jaws, we don't see a full picture of the size of the great white until we have the boat for comparison when the three men are on the boat. So the other thing to consider is the language you're going to use. You do want to avoid cliches. Don't rely on those older phrases from the Victorian age like spine tingling, blood curdling, or bone chilling. Word hippo is great for synonyms. You might try putting some terms together that people haven't experimented with. Use concrete specifics. The knife is less scary than the boning knife from the kitchen drawer. I love how Scribbler's AI took the old house and turned it into this skeletal, embodied house, and it's changed it entirely. It's really well done. Embrace discomfort. Use words that feel wrong. Things like squelch, seep, writhe, and fester. These are all really good terms to make your reader uncomfortable. Subtext and implication are also really good at building terror. What characters don't say aloud is really helpful to you as you're trying to build. And a lot of the times when we are facing the indescribable, we can't describe it. We don't have the words for it. We do have a webinar on writing subtext for you on Discord. If that's something that you're interested in, you can check our resources library. Think about things that people, the information they can reveal and what they're revealing through omission, what they're not saying. And there's often a gap between what happened and what's told when people say things, especially when they're scared. You can also consider using unreliable narration. This could create doubt in what's going on with your characters as well. A pro tip here is to read your scenes. Read them out loud. If you have a friend who's willing to listen, see how they respond to what you've written. The rhythm and pacing should feel uncomfortable and unsettling. If it's too smooth, it's just not working for your readers. It should be unsettling as they're listening to it or as you are reading it to yourself. So a few common mistakes to avoid as you're working on terror. A really important one is over-explaining. And this is important for just about every genre. In fiction, you want to make sure you're not telling your readers exactly why something is scary. This is going to kill the terror. We don't want to be, handheld and to explain why a monster is frightening. Trust your readers or your viewers to feel it. You can go back as you're editing and limit the exposition in your scenes with the rewrite, show, and don't tell function in Squibbler if you feel like you're including too much. And we also have a free webinar for you on our resources library in Discord to help you limit unnecessary exposition. Another thing to avoid is cheap scares, cheap jump scares. It was just a cat. These provide some relief, and sometimes audiences will laugh at them in the theater, but use them sparingly. Too many of them can kind of get cliche and a little bit, they're just not very interesting for your reader. We expect that the tension and the terror is going to grow from actual horrific events that are on the way to come, not from things that are just cheap jump scares. Make sure you're careful about crafting stereotypical and unbelievable stupid characters. Characters making obviously bad choices can frustrate readers or viewers, and this can pull your reader out of a book. It can pull your viewer out of your screenplay or movie. Sometimes smart choices we make actually lead to terrible situations and can lead to terror. Taking a long drive on a country road, like a husband and wife or a girlfriend and boyfriend might do, on a drive somewhere, is a pretty common thing. And that's not a stupid mistake necessarily, but it can be if you're writing a horror movie. Avoid beginning too much too soon as well. Starting at maximum terror leaves nowhere to escalate. You want to build your terror gradually, and also we should care about your characters. We need to see your characters prior to and what they're doing before the terror hits to actually care about them. Another thing is that if you're writing gore fests, those can be really fun, but violence without context or buildup is shocking and not really that terrifying. And it can get kind of into C and D grade movies for me. Your readers or viewers should care about the people that are in terror in your books or screenplays. Gore can be fun, but it's really good idea, again, to set up things to make us care about your characters before they are in intense situations. So overall, I think really it's important to remember to respect your readers as you're creating terror. The scariest stories are going to respect your characters and their readers' intelligence. You have to keep both in mind. So just for fun, some things to think about. We do have a competition on our Discord channel that is horror related. The contest ends this Friday, so you want to get your entry in. You'll find that in the contest channel. But you can try these exercises if you don't want to enter the contest. Think about something like the mundane meant wrong, an everyday location like a grocery store, a park, an office, a parking lot, and make it terrifying without monsters or gore. You might think about something like an unseen threat. Write a scene where terror builds, but we don't ever get the source of where this terror is from. H.P. Lovecraft is very good at this. Something with sound only. Create a fear that's only what a character can hear. Maybe they're stuck somewhere and they're listening to what's going around them. So you're experimenting with sound. The other thing you can think about is start after the horror event. Imply what happened through character reactions and environment. Some reading suggestions as well. If you want to look at some of the prose, Shirley Jackson is really good for psychological horror. Domesticity Made Sinister. If you've watched any of the recent Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, that is based on Shirley Jackson's famous book. Stephen King, of course, is good. Stephen King is great for character depth, slow burn tension. Edgar Allan Poe is really good at building atmosphere and unreliable narration. A lot of his narrators are psychopaths, so he's a really good read for that. And you can actually go to our reading channel on Discord. We are reading a month of Poe, his short stories and his poems. So you can jump in, click a link to read a story or short story, and we have reading discussion and thinking questions for you as well. Carmen Maria Machado is really good at body horror and lyrical prose, if that's something that you're interested in. And of course, H.P. Lovecraft for cosmic dread, the unknowable. So last food for thought here from one of the masters of creating terror and tension, Alfred Hitchcock. He says, there's no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it. So go forth as you're writing your horror and terrify your readers. We did review how to build dread through atmosphere. We took a look at how to use some of the tools from Squibbler's AI to do this. We looked at pacing and tension for mastering the rhythm of fear. And we talked about the power of the unseen, using the power of suggestion and keeping your readers terrified because they have not seen the full horror yet. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Hope you had a great time watching this session. And if you have any questions, thoughts, feedback, let's continue the conversation on our Discord server. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining me.